This is the simple, awful truth of the Biden administration. For the first time in American history, a presidential administration targeted its chief rival for criminal prosecution, concocted the most flimsy criminal charges, turned the federal law enforcement machinery against it, colluded with the Democratic state law enforcement officials to do the same. This is the historical record. This happened. And when we speak of threats to democracy, what greater threat can there be than one party trying to jail its political opposition? You know, I would frankly advise the ranking member to be very careful in citing the conviction of the president in the kangaroo court of Judge Merchan. A staggering range of legal experts, from Alan Dershowitz on one side to Jonathan Turley on the other, have commented at great length on just how outrageous these proceedings were and how likely they are to be overturned upon competent review. If these professors turn out to be correct, the ranking member and his many acolytes here in this Congress are going to have their words quoted back to them for the rest of their lives. You know, those who've tried to put their political opponents in jail have never fared well before history, and nor have their apologists. Omar Khayyam put it this way. He said, "The moving finger writes, and having writ moves on. Nor all thy piety nor wit can call it back to cancel half a line, nor all thy tears wash out a word of it." So my Democratic colleagues might want to take a step back and consider how history will judge them in the years ahead when passions have cooled and the facts remain. Now, Mr. Terwilliger, in the events leading up to the Civil War, the Confederate States asserted a power of nullification, supremacy over the federal government, that ultimately was resolved at Appomattox Courthouse. But I am unaware of any assertion by the Confederate States that they could, say, seize Abraham Lincoln and try him in their state courts. Is there any precedent in the entire history of our country of what the Biden administration and its partisans in New York and Atlanta attempted to do?
Not that I'm aware of, Mr. McClintock. In fact, you know, privately and to others perhaps in the president's circle, I described the command that Mr. Trump be in Judge Merchan's courtroom when he was already a declared candidate and ready to campaign, that he was truly America's first political prisoner. That case needs to be able to be removed from federal court, to federal court rather. I mean, suppose some state authority had decided that Joe Biden was not of sound mind and was a danger to himself or others, including the country, and decided to civilly commit him under state law. Do we think that case ought to have stayed in state court? Of course not. This is a very important step. And if I may just take the opportunity, because I think this is so important, Professor Besky is exactly right about the Mesa decision, which her Justice O'Connor, wrote. And it's why I think that when the committee marks this bill up, you ought to just simply incorporate federal question jurisdiction into the basis for removal, because all of these removal cases involve federal questions, such as what is the scope of the duties of the federal officer. We don't want those decided in state courts.
Professor Fuller, you mentioned how dangerous this precedent is to both political parties. What's to stop a partisan Republican prosecutor from going after the next Democratic presidential nominee? You know, the Democrats keep telling us that any day now, President Trump will try to do the same thing to them, even though he had 4 years to do that in his first term and didn't, and hasn't, of course, in the second so far. But if we simply follow the precedent that the Democrats have already set, he certainly could do that. What other measures do we need to take to prevent this from ever happening again? Mr. Terwilliger said that President Trump was the first political prisoner. We'd better make damn sure he's the last. So what can you guide us on?
Couldn't agree more. I mean, this is bad for the country. Yes, based on this precedent, any Republican state attorney general or now President Trump could appoint a special counsel and go after, you know, Biden and anybody in Biden's administration. So the precedent has been set, and it's a bad precedent. What's stopping that from happening? Honestly, we were talking about in the conference room beforehand, it's because Republicans actually believe in the rule of law. We actually believe in norms
Well, you know-
and preserving them.
By the way, liberals used to believe that too. I think liberals still do, but the left does not.
They did. I mean, when I worked on the Hill from 1987 to 1992, I worked for a Democratic member of Congress who is now a U.S. Senator, Senator Ron Wyden. And back then, when Ron Wyden was in the House, he was actually kind of moderate and reasonable and liberal, but not progressive. And he had classical liberal values that he adhered to. I think that's been completely lost by the Democratic Party. It's why I am no longer a Democrat, why so many others are no longer Democrats, including, for example, Elon Musk. I know that name is
Foley,
making people go crazy.
We've gone over the time. With that, I will
Yeah.
thank the gentleman from California.